Eve, Liz. Oh my God. Hold on. Liz, he was mowing the lawn? He was mowing the lawn? Is that what you said? Ready? Okay. Good evening, everyone. It being 6 o'clock on Tuesday. Sorry, there's been a lot of meetings and I forget what day it is. On Tuesday, May 21st, 2024, we will begin our 7th budget hearing for the Committee of Ways and Means. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence for all those who serve in our military at home and abroad and for their families. Thank you. Clerk Semino, can we have the roll call, please?
Councillor Barrica?
Here.
Councillor Moran?
Here.
Councillor Flaherty?
Here.
Councillor Meglio?
Here.
Councillor Reynolds is presently not here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. This evening, we have no approval of minutes and no old business. And again, as we've been saying over the last couple of weeks, the public hearing will be held for the budget on Wednesday, May 29th at 7 p.m. Public comment will be allowed at that meeting. Again, that's Wednesday, May 29th at 7 p.m. Between now and then, please feel free to send any questions or comments to towncouncil@braintreema.gov. I do want to acknowledge we have received emails, and thank you for your patience in any replies. We are getting them and reading them, and thank you to all the residents who are sending them in. So this evening, we will now move on to our business at hand, which is 24020 FY 2025 operating budget, or take up any action relative thereto. Do we have a motion to take off the table orders 24020 and 24022?
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. This evening, we will be reviewing our school department budget, and before we get going, I want to acknowledge our school committee members who are here with us tonight, Chairwoman Lisa Heeger, school committee member Rachel Horak, and Kathleen Tuffy. I want to say a sincere thank you to all the members of our school committee who are all volunteer and are doing it because they care deeply about our town and about our schools. And also thanks to Superintendent Lee, who's with us tonight, as well as Sarah Kaufman, our school finance director. It has been a very difficult spring for all of us who have children or do not have children in the school department. There is nothing that means more to any parent than your own kid. And so I want to recognize and acknowledge the hard work that our school committee members did over the many months in preparing the budget to come to us this evening. And I also want to remind residents that the council does not have the authority to raise the budget in any capacity. However, this year, you, the voters of Braintree, will have the opportunity to raise the school budget by $4 million during our special election for an override. $4 million is allocated for the school department should the override pass on June 15th, and the polls will be open that day from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So please exercise your right to vote. All right. With that introduction, I would like to welcome Superintendent Lee and Sarah Kaufman to join us this evening. And if you'd like to say any words, Superintendent Lee, the floor is yours.
Good evening. First, thank you for the opportunity to come and have us present our budget to you and answer any questions that you might have about next year's school budget. I want to start with the budget that was initially voted by the school committee on April 22nd. That was a budget of $79.9 million. It represented certain cuts within the school system, but limited in scope given that number. Tonight, I will be presenting, and I believe you have in front of you, a budget of $75.5 million, which is a budget we also have been working on since the beginning of March to make sure that we are aligned with the town's needs and priorities as they go through the budget process themselves. At $75.5 million on this past week, May 18th, we passed out reduction in force letters to 91 staff members, which, barring any change in the financial status of the community, whether it be through override or any other mechanism, would end their employment at the end of the school year. Can't listen to myself, thank you. With those reductions, there would be a significant impact to the schools. Programs would be reduced, if not eliminated. Class sizes will be raised. We will have a need to redistrict at the elementary level. We would lose academic levels at the middle school and a variety of other draconian measures that we'd need to take to meet that number at 75.5. As you look through the budget that's in front of you this evening, we've made a lot of adjustments. Actually, Sarah's done most of the work related to the numbers that you see before you, trying to take into consideration the impact of inflation, specifically around transportation costs, whether it be special education or regular ed transportation. We've also done a lot of work in terms of right-sizing lines that, as we have gone through the budget process, were obviously inadequate for our needs last year. And you can find those examples under special education, substitute teachers, homeless transportation, and tutors. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I just thought I'd give a broad overview of where we stand.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Lee. And again, thank you for all the work and for joining us this evening. I would like to turn it over to the committee members for questions to the superintendent and/or school finance director or town finance director, and we also have our town auditor here, Sean McGoldrick. Councilor Flaherty, would you like to start?
Thank you. So, first of all, I appreciate you taking the time to come out and explain this. This is really it's been a very difficult process for the community, and I also know that it has been through so many iterations that sometimes I'm amazed that you keep track of where we are right now. But having said all that, you commented in just a moment ago that if the override doesn't pass or if funding isn't provided in some way, you will anticipate the loss of 91 teachers and staff, and that would require a measure of redistricting on behalf of our community. But we are in May already, and the election is not until June. So can you elaborate on what that would look like if it came to pass?
If that particular set of circumstances came to pass, we would redistrict. We have the ability to do it. It is not the time frame under which I'd like to be working. It would be rushed. Most importantly, the notification to families would really not be sent out until after the override vote, meaning June 16th at the earliest. So it's a less than ideal set of circumstances, but if the financial situation requires it, we will redistrict.
Okay. Why would we redistrict instead of cutting other teachers or staff elsewhere?
Partly because the impact at 75.5, the impact across every single level is dramatic. The loss of teachers in all subject areas would require us to increase the number of studies at the high school for students, would require us to change graduation requirements at the high school for kids to be able to get their diploma on time. Again, it would remove academic levels at the middle school, it would remove world language at the middle school. The impact is felt district-wide. So from a position of equity, to make further cuts at the upper levels would reduce the educational quality to such an extent that I'd rather redistrict than not.
Okay. That was my main question. So really, that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. Councillor Maglio?
So I have actually a question about redistricting. I remember at some point it was a conversation that it needs to happen regardless of the override and regardless of funding shortages, because it's something that should be done periodically anyway. So can you, and I do remember the conversation last year when this came up about redistricting, and that it was going to be on the table for this year potentially. So what needs to happen in order to do that? What is it, an analysis, a census around who's going to which schools, and then determine if we are districted appropriately?
You brought up a great point that we looked at redistricting, actually approximately 2 years ago. We actually had a task force that was put together that discussed, amongst other things, redistricting. By redistricting, we become more cost efficient. And so one of the ways that we as a school system could recognize some of the changes in enrollment that we've experienced, and at the same time be as efficient as possible with the resources the town could provide us, we had the conversation around redistricting. By redistricting, you balance out class sizes across the town so that you don't have wild swings in class sizes in grade 1, for instance. So in grade 1, in some of our schools this year, we have class sizes of 15. In other schools, we have class sizes of 21 to 22. By redistricting, you can balance those all out so you get a mean closer to the number 18. And that's more efficient in terms of staffing and in terms of how you're utilizing your money. There are a number of ways you can go about the process. During the task force meetings, there was conversation about the work of some other communities that brought in an outside vendor to take a look at not just how to do it within the district, given the specifics of what Braintree would be, but also looking at the longer-term growth of the community and where areas of expansion might be necessary, given population growth in certain parts of the town. At this point in time, if time would allow us, I would recommend that that's the process that we would follow. But that is a longer process than 2 months, and that work cannot be done prior to the beginning of the next school year. Were we able to, whether it be through an override or other mechanisms, to be able to postpone redistricting, that would give us ample time over the course of next year to bring somebody in, take a look at the circumstances, make recommendations that could be shared with the school committee for final decisions, and give enough ample opportunity for families not only to weigh in, but to receive notification of where their child might be going to school. That said, you can also redistrict very quickly. It's not as, ideal, it's not as efficient, it's not as effective, but we can do it. Typically, you look at those borders between two schools where we have bus transportation around there, and we can move kids from one school to another to balance classes out as well as we can. It is not what I would recommend at this point, but it is something we can do if we must.
So you're ready to pivot if you need to and do redistricting if the override does not pass?
Correct.
If it does pass, we're okay, and there's a longer time period
Right.
to actually do it. And so is that something that is actually in motion? Does that need to be initiated by the school department or the school committee?
So if an override were successful, we would be in a position where class sizes could run at less than optimal but decent levels in terms of class sizes across the town. But we'd want to fix it. One, it is inefficient. It should be fixed. And two, we would have enough time to do so in a proper manner. So as soon as that is identified, you don't want to redistrict 2 years in a row. That would be kind of silly. But as soon as we understand where the town's position is going to be financially, if we don't need to redistrict, then the next step would be a recommendation to the school committee of bringing in an outside vendor, working with the town and Mr. Esmond's office to identify a vendor that could come in and make recommendations to the community.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I have a question that's much more micro level than that. So I don't know if that, okay. So can you just talk a little bit about the buses, the transportation? My understanding is the 2 miles away from the school and above, the state requires free buses.
Correct.
From 1.5 miles to 2, there's a fee. Under 1.5 miles, there's no option even with a fee.
There's a fee.
Under 1.5 miles, you could still opt for it, but you would pay the fee.
So at elementary, it's 1 mile. At middle school
Okay.
level, it's 1.5 miles. So, in terms of where we provide transportation, those are our limits, if you will. What you said earlier is true. From grades 7 through 12, over 2 miles,
Okay.
you're on your own. It doesn't need to, if we're going to bus you, we're going to charge you a fee. From grades K to 6, if you're over 2 miles, legally, we have to transport you for free.
Okay. And there's some changes that are happening in the structuring of those fees, and that's unrelated to the override.
Unrelated to the override, the school committee in the spring voted to raise fees. They were $180 a year. They will, for next year, be $360 for the year.
$360 for the year,
Correct?
per child,
Per child.
with a cap of $720.
How much? $720. Thank you.
Okay.
She's smarter than I am.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm all set.
Thank you, Councilor Maglio. Councilor Moran?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just thank you for being here, and I want to be clear about what you mean by the word redistricting. I want everyone to understand what you mean by redistricting, because redistricting can mean taking a few kids and moving them or closing a school. So what are we talking about?
At this point in time, we would be talking about identifying the facilities that we believe will be open in the short term and moving kids around to balance out class sizes by grade across the community. So most of the movement would occur between two schools that have close proximity to one another, but at this point, it does not factor in closing any school.
Okay. A lot of work has been done on your budget, and I completely support the override and the funding that it would bring to your department and to the schools. I think it's essential. But I do want to talk about a couple of areas within the budget that I'm concerned about cost containment that aren't, or they're ancillary to classroom instruction. One of them is transportation. Now, The town has lost 400 students since 2018. Through nobody's fault. It's a natural and national demographic phenomena that has been happening, everywhere. One would assume that since we've lost or we're educating fewer children, that we would be transporting fewer children. But our transportation costs have continued to grow during that time. The explanations in your presentations have been due to an aging fleet and the cost of fuel, but it seems to be growing beyond the cost of fuel increase. What is it about the fleet that is pushing these costs?
Additional repairs, given how much use they now have, we find ourselves having to do more work to keep them running. We had looked previously at outsourcing transportation as an entity, but we found it not only to be less cost-effective, but also less reliable, given the experiences other communities are having in terms of getting bids from vendors and having vendors have sufficient drivers to be able to provide the transportation. So there are cost increases that were contractual in nature. Last year, obviously, was a contract year for all the units within the community, including drivers and the Teamsters. So there was some increase in cost there as well. But in terms of looking at, when we were looking at the budget, we were talking about removing transportation for families that were not legally required to provide it for, and ultimately the decision was made to raise the fees instead to be able to maintain that for families' use.
Okay. Was there any opportunity to decrease administration costs with the reduction in the number of students?
In terms of the elementary, we did take a reduction in one of the principal jobs there. But looking at some of the cuts that were suggested on the budget that you have before you, moving other administrators out did not make sense to us from a safety and security perspective. So we did not take the cuts there.
Okay. That's all I'm going to ask about this budget. It's been parsed incredibly by the committee, and I commend them on their work, and the mayor's office and the finance director's office, and doing what they can to provide as high a level as they can within our fiscal restraints. I hope that regardless of the outcome of the override, and I do sincerely hope that it passes, we're going to be involved as a community in redistricting, and I hope that the process is inclusive, deliberative, and fact-driven. And I will play whatever part I am asked, and I hope that I am asked to participate as a representative of my neighborhood. Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Moran. And I will echo the sentiments of Councilor Moran and my fellow councilors in that I know all of us have been watching the school committee meetings, reading the PowerPoint presentations, and understand the level of scrutiny that has already gone into this budget. So with gratitude to our fellow elected officials for all of their work ahead of this process. I do have a couple of questions, and that is, the school committee voted on a budget of $79.9 million. The budget that's before us is $75.5 million. The override would provide an additional $4 million, so that would bring, if the override were to pass, the total to $79.5 million. That's still $400,000 short of what the school committee voted on. So can you please comment on what the plan's thought is on that balance of $400,000 if the override were to pass?
At this point, we're planning on the additional money that was voted by the school committee to not be present, and we are building a secondary plan that is 79.5. It reduces the number of layoffs from 91 down to 44, which is a much better number from not only maintaining our excellent staff and our teachers in their positions, but also in terms of the overall school program, allowing us to maintain areas that we would otherwise lose without the override. So we are not anticipating that additional money, and we're not building any plans based on it.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. And again, for voters at home, we have the opportunity to increase the school budget by $4 million. That doesn't often happen. It's never happened before in Braintree. So June 15th is the vote for the override, with $4 million of the $8 million going to the school budget specifically designated. And along those lines, if the override does not pass, I have a table in front of me, and I think it's within the materials that have been out in the public record about programming that will be reduced or drastically reduced. And I'm hoping you can comment on or quantify, if it's possible, the long-term implications. When I look at BHS support positions in special education would be reduced, as well as fifth grade math lab would be eliminated at the middle schools. And then math and reading specialists at the elementary schools would also be reduced. And understanding we don't have the money if we don't do the override. However, reducing those, in my opinion, what would be core academic functions, it would seem like would then compound educational problems that we would require additional attention, staffing, special ed resources to catch those kids up if they're not getting the resources when they need them in their educational journey.
I agree wholeheartedly, and throughout this process, I hope that we've been very articulate about the overall impact of a level-funded budget on the school system. You've highlighted several of the things that would occur. Students who need additional support would not get them, and there'd be no promise of that support coming later. Students who find a passion in some of our niche subjects like music, art, health, would find reduced opportunities to engage in those activities, and lowering their motivation to come to school and partake in the other quality programs that we have. At the middle school level, the elimination of teams and the elimination of leveling does have an impact. It has an impact on not only what families perceive to be the type of education that their kids are going to receive in classrooms, but also in a teacher's ability to differentiate for a large group with so many different talents within the room. There is nothing positive on this list that I'm going to go through, and I hope I have not in any presentation I've made thus far. It will change what the Braintree Public Schools look like for the foreseeable future until we can build back. As you can see, I hope from the chart that you're looking at, we've made a sincere effort to maintain the structure of all programs and to eliminate as few as necessary, so that when the opportunity presents itself, we can build back the programs that we had valued so highly over time.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Lee. And then my final question, I know one of our incredible high school students who serves on the school committee also touched at this, I believe, during the April 8th or April 22nd meeting. I can't remember which one now. But again, should the override not pass, we will be at risk of losing our accreditation because of media being eliminated. Is that accurate?
It is in a, not a far-fetched manner, but in a long-term manner. The reductions, we're going to have to report all of it to NEASC, which is the accrediting body for Braintree High School. They expect us to have a librarian. They expect us to have certain elective offerings. They expect that we have many things. But they are not, no one is looking to pull anybody's accreditation. So they would give us time and want to see effort on our part to rebuild whatever they feel are the priorities that they identify. So it'll be a long conversation with NEASC, but one that we'll engage with if we have to.
Well, that's certainly not the position that Braintree Public Schools has ever been in, nor is it one that I would ever want us to be in. because risking our accreditation not only is terrible for our children, it's terrible for our entire community, because it just is not the kind of light we want to shine on ourselves. So again, I want to thank the committee members, the school committee members who are here with us this evening, and the ones who couldn't make it, with deep appreciation for all the work you've done ahead of time. I just want to offer any other final comments or questions from the committee members. Sean, did you have anything you wanted to add? Okay, or Director Esmond?
I think, probably just one last piece of recapping. In the budget, we do have the $1.5 million reserve, and as the mayor said in her April 30th comments, and the superintendent alluded to, we will be working with, we have allocated an estimate of at least $500,000 as a way to finance one-time costs that are appropriate for that funding source, but as a way to help bridge this. As I noted, as the mayor noted in the discussion also around the $300,000 reserve that we filed, and with, thankfully, with your concurrence we have in place, a lot of these impacts were put together very, with not a lot of time until we, for the school committee and for many of our departments. So we're going to be working with across all of town government to make sure we can implement them at, no matter what the outcome is on the 15th. And that funding source will be a helpful component of that. So we'll be working with Jim and Sarah and the school committee on making sure that those resources can be used responsibly, as we noted, since they are one-time, but hopefully as a bridge for fiscal 25 into 26.
Thank you very much, Director Esmond. Okay, we do have a revolving fund for the school, just before we move on. And I believe that is for school buses and full-day kindergarten. Are there any questions on those fees for the revolving fund? On page 8. Okay. All right. With that, I think we can move on to our motions. Councilor Moran, if you would.
Going back to the CPC one?
Page 5.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we do have to, oh, Councilor Reynolds, good evening. We'll wait a second. I know you just got here. Did you have any questions for the school department? We're actually just wrapping up. Okay. All right. We do have to just amend the Community Preservation Committee budget motions that were done last night. Superintendent Lee, you're all set. Same with Director Kaufman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Unless you want to hear us
But
do
you
these
can
motions
listen to
over.
the motions if you want to.
They're very exciting.
So we're just going to read you those and then table the rest.
All right.
So we're going to vote on the CPC motions, then we're going to vote on the revolving,
Okay.
and then we can table the operating, which is 24020.
Thank you for keeping it all straight, Clerk Semino.
Okay.
Did you get that?
Do we have to move to reconsider these votes?
We do not.
Oh,
Well, according to
confirmed with
Carolyn,
legal.
I sent
Okay.
her an email. We're just a motion
go
to
with it.
amend previously adopted.
all right. Madam Chair, I would move to amend the previously adopted following motion. C1, in the amount of $125,000. I move to amend to $150,000. I need to read the
No, you do
whole
not
thing?
need to
No, I
read.
don't.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. C2?
Madam Chair, I move previously adopted C2 in the amount of $125,000 be amended to $150,000.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Madam Chair, I moved to amend the previously adopted C3 in the amount of $125,000 and move to amend it to $150,000.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Madam Chair, I move previously adopted C4 in the amount of $754,160 be amended to $747,234.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Madam Chair, I move previously adopted C5 in the amount of $59,430 be amended to $63,012.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous. Okay, now we will move to the revolving funds, 24022. Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I would move for favorable recommendation to the full council that in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half of the general laws, the town of Braintree hereby sets the maximum amount that may be spent during fiscal year 2025, beginning in July 1st, 2024, for the revolving funds established by ordinance for certain departments, boards, committees, agencies, or officers as follows. Elder Affairs, Department of Elder Affairs, $30,000. Immunization, Board of Health, $50,000. Library materials, library trustees, $45,000. Library room rental, library trustees, $5,000. Recycling materials, mayor in conjunction with the recycling coordinator, $4,800. Household hazardous waste, mayor in conjunction with recycling coordinator, $50,000. Full-day kindergarten, school committee, $1,100,000. Pro shop, mayor in conjunction with director of golf operations, $300,000. Food and beverage, mayor in conjunction with director of golf operations, $550,000. School bus, school committee, is that $500,000?
500,000?
We're missing a zero.
We'll fix
Okay.
that, thank you.
500,000. Tree replacement, mayor in the conjunction with Department of Public Works, $100,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That is unanimous. Yes.
I don't know if people at home might be confused. Can you talk about the similarity of revolving funds in terms of that they work sort of like enterprise funds, and that this is not additional money? This is money, this is all embedded into the budget that's being approved? Do I have that correct, right?
Yes.
And this is what they are allowed to spend up to, and it sets that cap.
Director Esmond?
I think the analogy is on target, but there's probably some notable differences with enterprise funds. Probably from a financial reporting perspective, and I know that's maybe not the best way to start for straightforwardness, but I think it's important to note that the revolving funds themselves these are essentially resources that would otherwise be available for the general fund town revenues, whereas typically enterprise funds are, let's say user fees or water, sewer, in the case we have the municipal golf course, those are typically sort of very clearly segregated and separated and are expected and authorized really to be discrete, and essentially they're sort of reported differently as separate funds from the general fund. So the communities are authorized to make a choice to, in certain cases, allow a department to essentially retain revenue. It still is subject to the town council's approval every year on how much that revenue could be retained, how much of that revenue could be retained and spent. It's often the case that these are, really, I'm not going to say low threshold because that implies that they aren't important to the departments, but they're not a material percentage of the general fund revenues, so the community makes the choice in those cases to allow them to often complement department operations. And ideally, the goal would be that, for the most part, should there be a swing, the department in the revenues collected every year, the general fund isn't exposed, essentially. The department's being mindful of those revenues being available with some variance, from year to year, and should, essentially be, while authorized, they should be mindful of how much funding is in that and how much they can rely on from year to year. So we're not building any budgetary exposure to the general fund within a year and in over several years. So I think the difference is, I think each year, essentially, the community through town council gets to make a choice as to whether or not these funds should be made available, continuing through the operation, to support the operation of the department. And that's really what this authorization is for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Maglio and Director Esmond. All right, is there a motion to table Order 24020?
Madam Chair, I move to table Order 24020.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. With that, our meeting this evening is over. I would like to thank BCAM, as always, for televising our meetings and bringing us to the public. Again, for people who may be watching, we will be having our annual town meeting on Wednesday, May 29th at 7 p.m. Public comment will be welcome. And with that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
I'm sorry, what's that, Liz? Oh, yes, tomorrow we will, I apologize. Tomorrow we will be back for the fire department. Thank you. All right, is there a motion to adjourn? I think we had a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. This meeting is adjourned.